Hi guys, John Florez again with backstories, my backstories, what happened in the back rooms, away from prying eyes, nothing to do with music ever, only politics. This is episode 2, and it's regarding James Bingham, J.B. Bingham, and his group Five Flights Up, where he was the lead singer. As you may remember, I took Five Flights Up with me when I left RCA and went independent, and Eddie Rosenblatt signed them to Talent Associates Records. Wow, saved my life, frankly. And we had a big hit record called Do What You Want to Do, and then we had follow-ups. But as I mentioned before in the previous episode, Eddie Rosenblatt, who was head of sales and promotion for Talent Associates Records, was dismissed. And the label, run by two TV guys, didn't have a promotion man after he left. They didn't hire one. So Five Flights Up was every bit as doomed, pardon the expression, as Linda Seals. There was no way in hell that we were going to have hit records. Their second release, After the Feeling Is Gone, is an even more powerful release than their hit Do What You Want to Do. In fact, the head of promotion for Bell Records said that one of his biggest regrets was not being able to bring After the Feeling Is Gone home to the charts where it belonged. Yes, it charted, but not very high, and he couldn't do much about it because Eddie was the brains behind promoting everything at Talent Associates Records. Bell was just the distributor, and frankly, they didn't promote anything that Talent Associates did. What I'd like to tell you is kind of like a casting director in a film. If you're going to have a good film, you need a star. And in this case, James Bingham, J.B. Bingham, was the star of Five Flights Up. He had a voice that was instantly recognizable, in the vein of Smokey Robinson, falsetto, black, soft soul, but the minute you heard him sing note number 1, you knew that that was J.B. Bingham. He had a unique, identifiable voice. A casting director looks for a star, and J.B. was the star. The minute he sang, you knew that was James Bingham. Okay, and the group had a really great group sound that sounded different than anybody out there at the time. I worked with a lot of vocal groups, and they all had their sound, but Five Flights Up just had this energy, this presence, this just wonderful, unique sound. So you had J.B. with his unique voice, and you had Five Flights Up backing him that were just as unique in their own way.
So you just do what you wanna do. 'Cause when I get tired of playing the fool, believe me now, I'll just go out. After the feeling is gone, where you want me, I still want you, baby. After the feeling is gone, where you want me. Like Monday follows Sunday, I'm gonna love you not for one day, but forever. Till we lose track of time. This time, girl, it was gonna be better than it ever had been before. So much better. You were gonna love me. I was gonna make sure that nothing would come between us. We'd be closer than a king. But sometimes castles crumble and stories end in tears. Don't take the last step in my life. Be a little stronger. Don't take the last step in my life. Wait a little longer. Don't cut me, girl, with my own knife. Don't take the last step in my life.
Plus which also too, which is what Jan Manley, my dear friend, lifelong friend from LAX, says, the members of Five Flights Up were delightful. There were no egos, there were no fights. There was nothing going on in the studio other than making music. And we had a blast, and we produced really good product. Thank you very much. We did an entire album. The entire album was shelved Its fate was determined the minute that Eddie Rosenblatt left the label. We didn't know it at the time, but that's what happened. So Five Flights Up's album ended on the shelves beside Linda Seal's, and that was the end of my Talent Associates days. Let me do one quick bit on Talent Associates. Frankly, this was the dream team. You had Eddie Rosenblatt, who became a legend in the record business later on. He went to Warner Brothers, where he was a vice president of sales there, and then he took over Geffen Records, where for years he's one of the most powerful men in the business. Okay, so you got Eddie promoting us, and you've got Lambert and Potter as the other producers other than me, and you know, they are incredible songwriters. They went on to produce, for instance, among many, many others, Rhinestone Cowboy, which was a #1 record for Glenn Campbell. We had, as artists, we had Five Flights Up, Linda Seals, Seals and Crofts, and the original cast that sang the theme song from Billy Jack, which Lambert and Potter wrote, and that was a big hit. So you had a small little company. You had John Florez, Lambert and Potter, and you had Eddie Rosenblatt, and I'm sorry, that's as good as it's going to get. You could take me to heaven now with just our group. I was so blessed to work with them. Okay, a further aside, you know, Eddie was very loyal to all of us, so he ended up behind the scenes getting Seals and Crofts a deal with Warner Brothers where they became big stars. Duh! And he was loyal to me over many, many years, but when I really needed a deal, I was independent, and Talent Associates had kind of gone by the wayside. My Bell Records years, I had no hit records. I had great pay, great royalty rate, and no hits. And Eddie basically came to my rescue and said, go see Lenny Waronker. And Lenny Waronker was head of A&R for Warner Brothers Records. Now, the thing that I will never know, and I've never mentioned before, is Lenny said to me, I don't want your act Five Flights Up. I just want James Bingham. I just want JB, the lead singer. Now, this is messy, because you see, had I not been so stupid, I would have declined the deal. But I was independent, I was looking for work, I needed to pay the mortgage, and I thought, okay, I'll take this project, but I don't necessarily like doing this because this doesn't feel right. And it still doesn't feel right. I should have walked away. Now, JB and I cut 4 tracks, and they're delightful, thank you. But I didn't mix them well. We'll get back to that in 1 second. So, okay, the members of Five Flights Up hear about this and say, please, John, don't break us up. We're a great act. And I said, I know, but the only deal we're being offered is for JB alone. Oh my God, that hurt. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do it. So the James Bingham dates for Warner Brothers were, they got off to kind of an awkward start because we couldn't get our studio room at Wally Heider Recording, where we had recorded Five Flights Up's album. It was booked. And so I went next door to Hollywood Recorders, and that was, unbeknownst to me, a dead room for recording in. It's almost as if it was surrounded by blankets. There was no life to that room. And when the rhythm section guys arrived, one of the things that I'll never forget is that the bass player, I think he was losing his marriage at the time, and he came in the room and he was really upset and not in a good space. So we're in a dead room with kind of a funked atmosphere because the bass player's losing his marriage, and we cut these tracks for James Bingham. Okay, so that's the way it was, and as a producer you accept that and you figure, well, I'll fix it in the mix. Well, in this case, no, because I mixed it at Hollywood Recorders too, and that was also a mistake because I had never mixed in that room. I didn't know how it would respond sonically and all of that. I just figured, you know, I'm a professional. I go from studio to studio and I can make this work. No. So my huge regret is that I delivered to Lenny Waronker, I believe, 2 hit singles. Out of the 4 tracks that we produced, I believe 2 of them could have been hits. The problem with them were the mixes. They actually kind of mirrored the fact that that whole studio, Hollywood Recorders, was Blanketsville. It was just dull. And so the mixes were dull. And if I could turn back the clock, I would make them sound better. funny now that you ask. I've done just that, and I love them both. You see, I had 2 dates that I was extremely embarrassed about. So James Bingham's was the first, and the second one will be coming up in episode 3, and that's the Linda Seals A&M solo dates. But when a producer goes and does his work and ends up home at night saying, I kind of blew this one, that doesn't sit well. It's really kind of dark. It's what could I have done? Well, now I know what I could have done, because if I had had half a brain, I would have gone in and pumped up those mixes. But I didn't. I handed over the product, and again, in those days, pretty much I mixed based on what the players played. So I wasn't hyping anything. I was just showing the way that it came down when we set it on tape. Okay, another little aside is in terms of control rooms. As I said, Hollywood Sounds was dead. Wally Heider's were live, and everything you did out of there just sparkled. Okay, and that's what I was used to. That's what I thought I was getting at Hollywood Sound, but it just didn't happen that way. What's interesting in retrospect is that RCA's control rooms, where I learned my craft, and then I came back to a couple of years later and made that my home room for many, many years thereafter. RCA's control room, for instance, Studio A, was very long and wide, and the speakers were put up on the wall by the ceiling, spread way apart and way away from where you were mixing. Okay, so what you do is you turn them up in order to try to get them to sound closer to you. I do remember other producers had gone in there and brought their own speakers and put them up on the recording panel just to do what maybe I should have done in the first place. But I had grown up in that studio. I had been taught and mentored by Rick Gerard in that studio. But I never really learned how to make RCA Studio A sound as live as Wally Heider's rooms were. Sorry, never got it, never figured it out until many years later. When I moved on with my career and eventually ended up back in Arizona, Chaton Studios, owned by my now deceased best friends, Ed Ravenscroft and his wife Marie, that was a live studio. Not just the studio, the control room, everything was letter perfect. Wally Heider hired a guy to come in regularly and zero out the room, which means to make it absolutely sonically accurate. Ed and Marie Ravenscroft at Chaton Recordings in Scottsdale did the same thing. They constantly had that room zeroed out so that it was perfect. I didn't know any of this stuff back when I was doing JB at Hollywood Recorders. Okay, so I ended up handing Lenny Warnaker a couple of hit singles that were poorly mixed. I'm sorry, Lenny. I'm sorry, JB. And more than anything, I'm sorry, guys in Five Flights Up. I love you. I wish I could go to heaven with that group. I wish we had been together forever and ever. I just love you guys so much, and I'm sorry I let you down. Okay, so let's do the normal before and after, and you're going to hear the couple of songs that I believe are hit songs. Lambert and Potter, remember Talent Associates days? Lambert and Potter wrote Put a Little Love Away, which is one of the two. And I want you to hear the before and afters, the way that the track sounded when I handed them off to Lenny Warnaker, and then my pumped up mixes the way I would do them if I could do them today. Okay? Doesn't make my attitude any better, because I kind of let everybody down back in the day, I think, including myself, because I didn't like my finished product, and all I needed to do was just kind of boost a lot of stuff. Okay? So that's it. Enjoy the befores and afters, and wait for episode 3. I'm glad you're watching. I appreciate you guys. You take care. Bye-bye.
Better put a little love away. Everybody needs a penny for a rainy day. So put a little love away. Better put a little love away. Everybody needs a penny for a rainy day. So put a little love away. Keep another thought in mind. watching you